the rejected Omega escaped into the mountains, until the Alpha King found her by her scent. Behind her, the sounds of the village faded into a distant echo, replaced by the haunting whispers of the mountain winds. She had no plan, only the need to escape. Escape from the village that had branded her a curse. Escape from the life that had never felt like hers. For years, the elders had called her the rejected Omega. The name weighed on her like iron chains. They said she carried a shadow in her bloodline, a misfortune that would bring ruin to her clan. No one had tried to understand her, not even her own family. Whispers followed her through every hall, every street, every corner she walked. And so she had fled. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and gray, their peaks shrouded in mist. The villagers believed no one could survive there. Spirits were said to haunt the crags, and ancient curses lay hidden beneath the rocks. But Lyra did not care. Survival was better than the cold rejection of her people. She had learned to trust only herself. As she climbed higher, the air grew thinner, sharper. The trees became twisted and strange, their branches like blackened fingers reaching for the sky. Shadows danced unnaturally on the rocky ground, as if the forest itself were alive and watching. She shivered, partly from cold, partly from fear, but she pressed onward. She had no choice. Lyra paused by a small stream, letting the icy water run over her hands. She drank quickly, the chill biting her lips, and leaned against a mossy stone. For a moment she let herself rest, closing her eyes and listening. The forest was silent, yet she could feel eyes upon her. The sense of being hunted was almost familiar now, a shadow that followed her wherever she went. "Not yet," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "I am not ready yet." Her thoughts drifted to the stories she had overheard in the village, the tales of the Alpha King. He was a ruler unlike any other, strong, merciless, and feared by all. His scent alone could be traced across leagues, they said. He was known to hunt with precision, finding those who tried to hide, leaving no trace behind. The thought of him sent a shiver through her spine, yet something strange stirred in her chest, a mix of fear, curiosity, and something she could not name. The path grew steeper, forcing her to climb over jagged stones and roots that twisted like snakes across the earth. Her legs ached, and the cold bit at her fingers. As night fell, the mountains transformed. Shadows deepened, and the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls. Lyra found a small cave to rest in, its mouth hidden by a curtain of ivy. She pressed herself against the cold stone, pulling her cloak tight, and tried to calm her racing heart. Sleep came in broken moments, haunted by dreams of fire and shadows. She saw herself surrounded by the villagers, their faces twisted in anger and fear. They called her cursed, unworthy, and in her dream, the shadows themselves joined in their condemnation. She woke with a start, her chest heaving, sweat cold against her skin. When morning came, the fog hung low in the valleys. Lyra pushed herself out of the cave, determination stiffening her spine. She had survived the night, and she would survive the mountains. But as she walked, the air shifted. A scent reached her, faint, elusive, yet undeniably distinct. Something primal stirred within her. She froze, nostrils flaring. It was not the smell of the forest, nor the damp stone. It was warm, sharp, commanding, a scent that called to something deep inside her. Her heart thudded painfully. She knew, without knowing how, that she was being followed. Someone was near, yet she could not see him. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows. Tall, broad, moving with a grace that was both terrifying and hypnotic. His presence seemed to bend the air around him. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs would not move. Her breath caught in her throat as the figure drew closer. "Lyra," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying authority without cruelty. "You cannot hide forever," she recoiled. How did he know her name? And yet, the sound of it spoken aloud sent a shiver through her. Who are you?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "I am Kale," he replied, and the name itself seemed to command the air around them. "I have been searching for you. Lyra's mind raced. The Alpha King. The stories, the legends, and now he stood before her, as real and terrifying as the mountains themselves. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of something new flickered. Curiosity, perhaps, or the unspoken longing of a heart that had been alone too long. You cannot take me back," she said firmly, though her voice shook. "I am not your subject. I am not yours." Kale's expression did not change, but his eyes softened ever so slightly. "I do not seek to own you," he said, "but you cannot survive these mountains alone. The dangers here are greater than any village you have fled." Lyra hesitated. Pride warred with fear. The mountains were cruel, but submission to this king, even for survival, was something she could not yet accept. And yet, the thought of trying to escape him, of running through these cursed peaks alone, was terrifying. Kale stepped closer, yet carefully, as if respecting an invisible boundary. "I can help you," he said, "but you must trust me at least a little." Lyra's heart pounded, and for the first time she felt the weight of her solitude. Her body ached from the climb, her mind from fear, and her soul from years of rejection. Trust was a concept she had abandoned long ago. Yet the way he moved, the calm strength in his eyes, it was unlike anyone she had ever met. I cannot trust anyone," she whispered. "Then let me prove you wrong," Kale said softly, yet with undeniable strength. "You do not have to speak, only follow." Lyra glanced at the mountains, the jagged cliffs, the endless forests. She could feel the danger in every corner, the curses whispered in the wind, and the shadows that seemed to move with a mind of their own. And then she looked at him, the Alpha King, the hunter, the unknown, and she made a choice. Not for him, not for the kingdom, but for herself. Slowly she nodded. Kale extended his hand and she took it, her fingers trembling. The contact sent a strange warmth through her, like fire beneath ice. Together they stepped into the forest, moving toward an uncertain future. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to watch them. Branches bent as if to block their path, strange whispers floated on the wind, and shadows twisted unnaturally. Lyra felt her powers stirring, subtle but undeniable. Her connection to the forest, to the mountains, to the unseen forces around her, was awakening. She could feel life and death intertwined in the trees, the rocks, the mist. Kale did not speak, but she could sense his awareness. His senses were sharp, attuned not just to the world but to her. Every movement, every breath he seemed to anticipate, yet never forced, never overpowered. The tension between them was a current, a silent dance of power and restraint. As dusk fell, they came upon a cliff overlooking the valley below. The sun was a dying ember, casting long shadows across the mountains. Lyra's heart ached with exhaustion and wonder. She had never seen the world from such heights. The kingdom looked distant, fragile, small beneath the expanse of mountains and sky. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. Kale's gaze met hers, steady and piercing. "Because your story is not yet finished," he said. "Because you are not meant to be hunted nor hidden. You are meant for more." Lyra's chest tightened. The words were heavy and yet light, like a key unlocking a door she had never dared open. She wanted to speak, to argue, to flee, but the wind, the mountains, and the twilight seemed to hold her still. Then, from the forest behind them, a faint rustle echoed. The hairs on her neck stood up. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Kale froze, muscles taut, every sense alert. Lyra's stomach clenched. Something or someone was coming. Kale's eyes narrowed. "Stay close," he said, voice low, controlled. "Whatever it is, we face it together." Lyra nodded, fear and fascination mingling in her chest. Her flight had brought her here, into the mountains, into danger, and into the path of a king whose scent she could not forget. And somewhere deep inside, she realized this was only the beginning. The wind picked up, carrying a scent she had not known before, warm, commanding, and utterly inescapable. Her heart lurched. Someone or something was drawing near, and the mountains themselves seemed to whisper her name. Lyra clutched Kale's arm instinctively. His hand was strong, grounding, yet gentle. The shadows stretched long and dark across the cliffs, and the last rays of the dying sun vanished behind the peaks. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that her story was no longer hers alone. And as the shadows in the forest moved, she knew that the Alpha King's hunt had truly begun. The night in the mountains was alive with whispers. Shadows stretched and twisted among the trees, dancing unnaturally under the pale light of the moon. Lyra pressed herself closer to Kale, her fingers brushing the sleeve of his cloak. Every nerve in her body screamed caution, yet the warmth of his presence offered a strange comfort. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. Her voice trembled, not with fear alone, but with the realization that the mountains themselves seemed aware of their presence. Kale's eyes scanned the darkness, glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Yes," he said, his voice low and steady. "We are not alone." Lyra swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. She had thought the forest's shadows were the most frightening things in the mountains. But now, with Kale beside her, she sensed something older, deeper, and more dangerous. A presence that belonged not to humans or animals, but to something ancient and powerful. Kale moved silently, his steps precise and deliberate. His senses seemed to stretch beyond the limits of the mortal world. Lyra tried to keep up, though her legs burned and her lungs ached from the climb. Every step reminded her of why she had fled the village. She had been taught to survive, to avoid attention, to hide her powers. But with Kale, she realized her powers were stirring in ways she could not control. As they climbed a steep ridge, Lyra noticed the forest around them reacting. Branches swayed without wind, leaves rustled though the air was still. Shadows bent unnaturally, stretching toward them but never touching. Her heart pounded. "Your abilities," Kale said suddenly, as if reading her mind, "they are awakening faster than I thought." Lyra looked at him, startled. "I don't understand," she said. I am nothing. I am weak." Kale shook his head, his dark hair catching the moonlight. "You are neither nothing nor weak. The blood in your veins is tied to forces older than kingdoms. You have power, Lyra, power they fear, power they tried to destroy before it could grow." Lyra's chest tightened. Power. She had always felt different, like the shadows whispered secrets to her, like the wind carried messages she could barely understand. But she had never dared to believe she was strong. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the rustling forest. Kale's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, revealing a depth of understanding that surprised her. "The curse they speak of it is not yours. It was woven to control you, to keep you small, afraid. They feared what you could become. They feared the bond your existence could create." Lyra blinked, confusion and disbelief mixing with hope. "They lied all this time," Kale nodded. "Yes, and that is why I must find you. You cannot face this alone, and neither can your enemies be allowed to shape your destiny. Not now, not ever." Lyra's heart raced. The weight of rejection, the years of isolation, the fear of her own powers, everything pressed down on her. Yet the strength in Kale's words, the certainty in his presence, was like a beacon cutting through the darkness. They moved deeper into the mountains, where the forest thinned, revealing jagged cliffs and rocky paths slick with mist. The wind whistled sharply through the peaks, carrying strange sounds that made Lyra's skin prickle. She shivered and wrapped her cloak tighter, stealing glances at Kale. He noticed. "You do not need to hide from me," he said, his voice firm but calm. "I am not here to hurt you." Lyra's fingers brushed against her chest, where the memory of countless rejections still throbbed. I am afraid," she admitted, almost whispering it to herself. Kale paused, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was grounding, firm, yet gentle. "Fear is natural," he said, "but fear will not define you. I will not let it." For a moment, Lyra felt something shift inside her. Trust. No, not trust yet, but a fragile flicker of hope. She had spent her life running from shadows, but now, with Kale beside her, she began to believe that maybe she didn't have to run forever. As the night deepened, they found a small plateau with a clear view of the valley below. The moonlight painted the cliffs silver, and the mist swirled around them like ghostly ribbons. Lyra gasped, the view both terrifying and beautiful. For the first time in her life she felt small, yet part of something vast and alive. Cale studied her silently, his gaze unreadable. Then he spoke, low and deliberate. "You are ready to face what comes next, but there are dangers here far greater than rejection or curses." Lyra's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Not all who dwell in these mountains are as they seem," Cale said. "Some are shadows given form, others are spirits bound by ancient oaths. Many seek to test those who enter this realm. Some are curious, some are cruel. You must be careful, your strength will draw attention." Lyra's heart pounded at the thought. Yet beneath the fear, a strange thrill stirred. The mountains had always called to her, though she had not understood why. Now, faced with real danger and guided by Cale, she realized she could face what she had once only dreamed of confronting. Suddenly, a rustle came from the tree line. Lyra's breath caught and Cale's body tensed. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. A figure emerged, tall, cloaked in darkness, moving with an unnatural grace. Lyra's fingers dug into Cale's arm instinctively. "Who are you?" Cale called, his voice cutting through the night. The figure stopped, silent, as if studying them. Then, without warning, it vanished into the shadows. Lyra's pulse raced. She had felt it, power unlike any she had ever sensed. And though she could not see it clearly, she knew instinctively that it was watching, waiting, judging. "You felt that," Cale said, his gaze fixed on the tree line. "Do not fear it, but do not underestimate it either. It is drawn to you, and it is not the only one." Lyra's stomach twisted. "Drawn to me? Why?" "Because of what you are," Cale said. "Because of what you will become." The wind shifted suddenly, carrying scents she could barely name. Lyra's senses screamed at her, urging her to flee, yet she stayed, rooted by a mixture of fear and fascination. Cale's presence was steady, his strength a shield against the unknown. "You must understand," Cale said, his voice softer now, almost intimate. "Your journey is not simply to escape. It is to awaken, to grow, to claim what is yours by right." Lyra's chest tightened. She had never considered destiny, never allowed herself to believe she could be more than the village's outcast. Yet the weight of Cale's words settled over her like a promise of power, of purpose, and perhaps of something more. As they moved forward, the night deepened and the forest grew stranger. Trees bent unnaturally, roots twisted into shapes like hands reaching from the earth. Shadows stretched long and dark, moving as if alive. Lyra's senses prickled, her powers stirring, faint but undeniable. She could feel life and death intertwined in the forest, the heartbeat of the mountains themselves. Cale moved with uncanny precision, avoiding hazards she barely noticed. Every step he took seemed guided by instinct and ancient knowledge. And with every step, Lyra felt herself being drawn closer, not just to him, but to the truth he promised. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, and eventually they reached a hidden glade. The moonlight fell in silver beams through the mist, illuminating a small pool of water. The air here was still, almost sacred. Lyra knelt by the pool, dipping her hands into the icy water. Reflected in its surface, she saw herself, the same girl who had fled rejection, yet now standing on the edge of a new life. Cale joined her, kneeling beside the water. "The path ahead will not be easy," he said, "but you are stronger than you know. Stronger than they ever allowed you to be." Lyra looked at him, a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something she did not understand filling her chest. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You will," Cale said, his hand brushing hers. "Not because I say so, but because it is in you. You were born for this, Lyra, born to rise above the shadows." For a moment, silence fell. Only the gentle ripple of the pool and the distant howl of the wind broke it. And then, as if on cue, a distant cry echoed across the mountains, a sound of pain, fear, and rage. Lyra's eyes widened, Cale's expression hardened. "They know you are here," he said, "and they will come." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows lengthening and moving with purpose. Yet even as fear gripped her, she felt a strange surge of determination. She would not run forever. She would face whatever came next, because she was no longer alone. Cale stood, his figure imposing yet protective, and offered his hand to her. Lyra took it, feeling the warmth of his strength against her trembling fingers. Together, they stepped toward the unknown, the forest alive around them, the night heavy with magic and danger. And in the shadows, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the moment to strike. The mountains were alive with movement. Shadows slithered between twisted trees, and the mist clung to every rock like fingers reaching for the living. Lyra's heart raced as she followed Cale, each step careful, measured. The wind carried whispers she could barely understand, as if the mountains themselves spoke in riddles. "This way," Cale said, his voice low and commanding, guiding her along a hidden path that twisted sharply upward. "There is a place where we can rest. It is safe for now." Lyra glanced at him, her pulse still rapid. "Safe," she repeated, a hint of doubt in her voice. The mountains had proven themselves dangerous already, and she had no reason to trust them. Or anyone, really. Yet something in Cale's presence, in the steady power he radiated, made her legs move forward despite the fear curling in her stomach. They climbed a ridge until they reached a valley carved deep into the mountains. Fog hung heavy in the air, glowing faintly under the silver light of the moon. The ruins of an ancient castle lay ahead, its walls crumbled, covered in moss and ivy. The stones hummed with an old, quiet magic. Cale paused at the edge of the clearing. "This is where we stop," he said. "The magic here will shield us from those who hunt you tonight." Lyra looked at the ruins, awe mixing with fear. The air felt thick, alive, almost breathing. Her fingers tingled, a faint warmth spreading through her palms. She realized her abilities were awakening, responding to the magic around them. She could feel the pulse of the old stones, the memories trapped in the walls, the lingering power that refused to die. Cale studied her closely. "Do you feel it?" he asked. Lyra nodded, eyes wide. I think I can. Something is calling to me." "Good," Cale said, his tone sharp but approving. "It is time you understand what you truly are." Lyra's chest tightened, fear mixed with anticipation. She had spent her life believing she was weak, that the curse defined her. And yet now, standing beside Cale in this ancient place, she felt something awaken inside, a strength she had never known. The silence of the ruins was broken by a sudden sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the ground beneath them. Shadows moved along the walls, stretching unnaturally, forming shapes that were not quite human, not quite animal. Lyra's breath caught and she instinctively stepped closer to Cale. "They have found us," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Stay close, follow my lead." The shadows advanced, swirling and twisting like living smoke. Lyra could feel the fear rising in her chest, but Cale's presence steadied her. His hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her in the moment. She clenched her fists, and instinctively a small wave of energy pulsed outward, sending the nearest shadow recoiling. Cale's eyes widened slightly, a rare flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You are stronger than you realize," he said. Lyra's heart pounded. She had never thought of herself as powerful, yet the sensation was intoxicating, frightening, and exhilarating all at once. The shadows hesitated, as if sensing her growing strength. Cale moved forward, his voice ringing with authority. "Begone!" he shouted, and a wave of energy surged from him, striking the shadows. They screamed, a sound like metal scraping against stone, before retreating into the darkness. Lyra's legs shook, but she did not run. She looked at Cale, who studied her with a mixture of pride and caution. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The mountains will test you. The magic will push you, but you are not alone." For a long moment they stood in the ruins, the mist curling around them like a protective veil. Lyra's mind raced. She had fled from rejection her entire life, only to find herself in a place of danger. And yet, For the first time, she felt like she belonged. Not in the village, not in the world she had known, but here, in the mountains facing shadows she could now touch, repel, and perhaps even control. Kale's voice broke her thoughts. "Lyra, I need you to understand something. The curse they placed upon you, it is tied to my bloodline. Our families are connected in ways neither of us knew. That is why they feared you. That is why you were hunted." Lyra's eyes widened. "Connected how?" Kale shook his head. "I do not know all the details. But the truth is buried in the past, and if we are to survive, you must trust me to guide you. Trust." The word felt foreign to her. She had spent her life hiding, running, and protecting herself. Yet the way Kale spoke, the steadiness in his presence, made her want to believe, to hope, to step beyond the fear that had ruled her. Before she could respond, a sudden crash echoed through the ruins. Stones tumbled from the walls, and a shadow lunged from the darkness, larger and more menacing than the others. Lyra gasped, but Kale was ready. He stepped forward, arms raised, his presence radiating power. "Stand behind me," he commanded. Lyra hesitated, then obeyed. The shadow attacked, and Kale met it with a force that seemed to bend the air itself. Lyra watched, awestruck, as the Alpha King moved with a strength and precision that left her breathless. Then something inside her stirred. Fear turned to resolve, and her hands glowed faintly with energy. She stepped forward, sending a pulse of light that struck the shadow. It screamed, recoiling, giving Kale the opening he needed to strike it down completely. Lyra's chest heaved. I did that," she whispered, barely believing it. Kale nodded, his expression unreadable, though a hint of pride softened his sharp features. "Yes. And there will be more challenges. But tonight you faced the first, and you did not run. That is progress." Lyra felt a rush of emotion. Fear, pride, and a strange sense of connection to Kale all mingled inside her. For the first time, she realized that survival was not about fleeing or hiding. It was about facing the shadows, both outside and within herself. The night wore on, and the ruins grew quieter. The shadows had retreated, but the air still thrummed with magic. Lyra knelt by the pool again, the reflection of the moon shimmering on the surface. She touched the water, feeling her power pulse faintly beneath her fingers. Kale sat beside her, close but not intrusive, his presence steady and reassuring. "You are awakening," he said. "And with awakening comes responsibility. You cannot run from what you are. The mountains will demand your strength, and you must be ready." Lyra looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I am ready." Kale's gaze met hers, unwavering. "You are more ready than you think, and you are not alone. I will be here, but you must trust yourself as well." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying a scent she had not known before, sharp, commanding, and impossible to ignore. Her pulse quickened. Something was coming, something stronger than the shadows they had faced. Kale's eyes narrowed, his senses alert. "They are not finished with us," he said. "Whatever approaches is drawn to you, and it is far more dangerous than the others." Lyra's fingers dug into the cold stone beneath her. Fear mixed with a strange thrill. She had spent her life running, hiding from rejection, hiding from herself. Now she was standing on the edge of something greater, facing dangers that would have terrified her before, and she was not alone. Kale's hand brushed hers, steadying, grounding. "Tonight is the first step," he said. "Tomorrow, the mountains will test you more. And you must be ready to face what lies beyond." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding. She could feel her powers stirring, responding to the magic of the ruins, to the presence of Kale, and to the unseen threat approaching. The mountains whispered their secrets, and she knew her journey was only beginning. The shadows had been only a warning. The true test was coming. And as the moon climbed higher in the sky, a distant howl echoed through the peaks, a sound of hunger, power, and something ancient. Lyra's breath caught. Kale's eyes darkened with resolve. "Prepare yourself," he said, voice steady and commanding. "The next challenge will define who you are and what we will become together." Lyra swallowed hard, fear and anticipation mingling in her chest. The mountains had claimed her path, the shadows had tested her strength, and now, with Kale at her side, she felt the stirrings of power and courage she had never known. The night was far from over. The wind howled through the peaks, carrying with it a scent that made Lyra's stomach tighten. It was the same scent she had sensed before, a presence both ancient and powerful, something that belonged neither to human nor beast. The shadows of the mountains seemed to bend toward it, and the very air trembled. Kale stood beside her, his eyes scanning the cliffs with unmatched precision. His armor glinted faintly in the moonlight, though it was the quiet strength in his posture that made Lyra feel safe. For the first time, she realized how much she had come to rely on him, not just as a protector, but as a guide into a world she had never understood. "They are coming," Kale said, his voice low and certain. "The one who hunts you is older than these mountains, older than the kingdoms themselves, and it has waited a long time for your power to awaken fully." Lyra's fingers trembled as she clenched them at her sides. I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. But deep down she felt a spark, a confidence born of every challenge she had faced in the mountains, every shadow she had confronted, every step she had taken toward Kale. "You are ready," Kale said firmly. "You just have to believe it." The distant howl came again, louder this time, echoing against the cliffs like a drumbeat of doom. Lyra could feel it in her bones, a vibration that resonated with the power inside her. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. She had never known such energy, and yet she did not flee. Not anymore. They moved carefully along a narrow ridge, the mist curling around their ankles. The mountains seemed alive, watching, waiting, testing. Kale's presence beside her was steady, and for the first time, Lyra felt that fear could be turned into something else, something powerful. The shadow emerged suddenly from the fog, towering and dark, its form shifting as if the mountains themselves had given it shape. Lyra froze for a heartbeat, then drew in a deep breath. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something stronger, determination. Kale raised a hand, energy rippling from him in waves. "Stand with me," he commanded. "We face this together." Lyra nodded, feeling the warmth of her powers spreading through her hands. The pulse of the mountains, the magic in the ruins, the trust in Kale's presence, they all combined into a strength she had never known. She felt the power inside her responding to the threat, a river of energy coiling and ready to flow. The shadow lunged. Its roar shook the rocks, sending pebbles tumbling down the cliffside. Lyra felt the wind push against her, the raw force of its presence filling the valley. She planted her feet firmly, raising her hands instinctively. A wave of light erupted from her palms, striking the shadow. It hissed, recoiling, but did not fall. Kale moved with precise force, striking the shadow with energy that split the mist around it. Together, they pushed it back, the air crackling with the collision of their powers. Lyra felt a surge of exhilaration, fear mingling with thrill, as if the mountain itself had chosen this moment to test her fully. "You are stronger than you know," Kale said, his voice firm but encouraging. "Do not hold back." Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment, reaching inward. The pulse of the mountains, the energy around her, the ancient power that had always been hers, they responded. When she opened her eyes, a brilliant light shone from her hands, bright enough to pierce the thick fog. The shadow shrieked, staggering, and for the first time Lyra felt not fear but control. She moved forward step by step until she stood directly before the shadow. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. "I am not afraid," she said, her voice strong, "and I will not run." The shadow lunged again, but Lyra held her ground. She let the energy flow freely, surrounding the creature, pressing it back with light and force. Kale moved beside her, their energies weaving together, pushing the ancient power toward a single purpose: protection, not destruction. The shadow reeled, its form distorting as if it could not withstand the combined strength of Lyra and Kale. Then, with a final scream that shook the mountains, it dissolved into mist, leaving only silence behind. The fog lifted slightly, revealing the valley bathed in moonlight. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Her hands glowed faintly, the remnants of her power echoing in the air. She looked at Cale, who knelt beside her, a rare softness in his dark eyes. "You did it," he said quietly. "You faced the darkness and did not falter, not once." Lyra shook her head, disbelief and wonder mingling in her gaze. I couldn't have done it without you." Cale's hand found hers, firm and grounding. "No," he said, "you did this. I only helped you see what was already inside you. You are not the rejected Omega anymore. You are something far greater." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe it. The fear that had ruled her life, the rejection that had haunted her since childhood, it was no longer hers to carry alone. She had survived the mountains, faced shadows older than kingdoms, and discovered a power she had never known. The night was quiet now, the only sound the gentle rustle of the mist and the distant howl of the wind through the peaks. Lyra rose to her feet, standing tall beside Cale. She felt the mountains around her, alive and humming, acknowledging her strength. Cale studied her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and certain. "Lyra, the path ahead will not be easy. But you have proven yourself tonight. Whatever comes, we face it together." Lyra met his gaze, a mixture of gratitude, awe, and something deeper, a bond forged in shadows, strengthened by fear and tempered in courage. "Together," she echoed. The dawn began to break, pale light spilling over the peaks, painting the mountains in shades of gold and silver. The air felt lighter, the shadows receding with the first rays of sunlight. Lyra breathed deeply, feeling the mountain's power in every heartbeat, every breath. Cale placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "You have embraced your destiny," he said. "The curse that bound you is broken not by chance but by choice, by courage, by strength. And now the world must see what you are." Lyra nodded, understanding at last. She was no longer the hunted, no longer the rejected. She had been tested by darkness and emerged stronger, a force of her own making. The bond with Cale, forged in fear and tempered by trust, was more than companionship, it was partnership, a union of strength, will, and destiny. As they began their descent from the cliffs, Lyra glanced back at the ruins, now bathed in morning light. The shadows were gone, the mountain silent, and yet she could feel the pulse of power lingering in the stones. It was a reminder, the mountains had tested her and she had survived. But the journey was not over. The wind carried a new scent, faint but undeniable. Lyra inhaled, a shiver running down her spine. It was unfamiliar, powerful, and full of promise. She looked at Cale, who noticed the change in her expression. "They are not finished," he said, a hint of a smile crossing his face. "But neither are we." Lyra nodded, determination burning in her chest. The past, with its rejection and fear, was behind her. The future, uncertain but full of potential, stretched ahead. And with Cale by her side, she knew they could face whatever awaited together. The mountains whispered around them, ancient and alive. Lyra listened, feeling the bond between herself, Cale, and the world that had once rejected her. She was no longer alone. She was powerful, she was free, and she was ready to embrace the destiny she had once feared. As the first rays of sunlight touched their faces, Lyra and Cale walked side by side, ready to face whatever new challenges the mountains and the world would bring. The shadows of the past had fallen away, replaced by the strength of courage, trust, and the beginning of something far greater. And somewhere in the wind, the mountains seemed to whisper a single truth. The Alpha and the Omega had found each other, and together they were unstoppable.